Welcome to this edition of Northwest Real Estate Forum. I'm your host, Patricia Wangsness. Our mission is to bring you experts and relevant topics that will help you understand the art, science, and timing of real estate, because after all, your home is your biggest asset. Joining me today is Annie Searle, principal of ASA Risk Consultants. Annie is a risk management professional with over 25 years of risk management, working with both large and small companies, and now the author of a book, Advice from a Risk Detective. This book is meant to help you minimize the risks in your personal life. She is founder and principal of Annie Searle & Associates, LLC, a Seattle-based consulting firm since 2009. Her background includes a 10-year stint as a senior executive for enterprise risk services at Washington Mutual, and 15 years as president and CEO of Delphi Computers and Peripherals. She is a member of the International Hall of Fame for Women in Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So I'm really excited to have you here. First of all, you're my first real author that I've had on the show, and you have so many good things that will really be important for our audience. So you have 4 areas that you cover: home, work, online, and travel. So
Right.
This part 1, we're going to talk about home and work, and then when we do the part 2, we'll do the work and travel.
That's fine.
The travel and the online. So, okay, home. What's the most important risk that people face in their home environment that you cover in the book?
I think if we're talking about the Northwest, and we probably should be for this program, the most important risk is that people really haven't taken a hard look at their home to understand what kinds of inherent risks they have in it. In theory, when you buy a home, you go through a due diligence process, and you certainly have an inspection. And I suppose it's possible that when you have an inspection, it will be pointed out whether or not your house is tied down to its foundation. But what we know is that most homes built before 1980 in the Northwest are not tied down. And earthquakes are an infrequent, but I would say the highest of the natural disaster risks that we face. So to actually take a look at your house and to understand whether or not your home is secure from that point of view, I think, is the largest risk. There are all kinds of other pieces of advice in the book about making sure that you don't have large, delicate objects that can fall off walls if walls shake during an earthquake. There's other advice, in particular, about home insurance that's based on my own personal story. I found that storytelling is pretty effective, generally, for people getting the point. We had a home in Rochester in the 70s. It was a 3-story house, A-frame. The 3rd floor was all books. It was my husband's study, and he was writing a book. We had a short in the typewriter, and the whole 3rd floor of the house burned in the middle of the winter. So we were faced with the fact that we had no inventory, in particular of the books. And there's a picture in the book of the 2 of us that was in the newspaper, crouching down in icy snow, picking up individual pages of the book, trying then to reconstruct what titles we might have owned by that author. And fortunately, we had very good home insurance, both on contents and on the dwelling itself. So the house was rebuilt, but it was a graphic and really frightening experience. And I think that people are required to have insurance when they take out a mortgage to a certain extent. But I don't think people spend a lot of time thinking very much about their contents or how in the world they would reconstruct a list of what their contents were.
If they had a disaster.
Fire, earthquake, antiquated heating systems. Sometimes fires start from that. Water systems where the water heater will burst and cause great damage in a basement. So I think that's a place to start, and then to figure out what other kinds of documents, like a list of your assets, are important to have and to keep them outside the home as well as inside the home. Whether you keep them online in a safe deposit box.
Yeah, now you can do so much online.
You can do many things, and we can talk about that later if you want.
Okay. What's the biggest risk people face at work?
Probably the largest risk that I talk about at work is a possible risk from another employee. So, though I hadn't originally planned to cover that type of risk in the book, I think news events this past summer caused me to go back and rewrite sections on harassment, on bullying, and then on violence in the workplace. And then also to look at what I'd originally planned to look at, which is, do you have a kit in your desk which has supplies in it so that if something happened and you had to stay at work, you weren't allowed to go home? It's called shelter in place. You would actually have what you need in terms of cosmetics, medications, foods, a change of clothes. Have you thought that through, and have you got something like that at work?
So it's interesting because things such as the earthquake that you prepare for at home, if there was
Same
an
thing.
earthquake, and you couldn't get to.
Exactly.
Oh.
If the city said there's going to be no movement on the streets because the streets are basically torn up, people must shelter in place, then you need to think about what you would need to have there in your office to get you through.
That's a really good consideration, especially the medication thing and the makeup thing. Gosh
Well,
forbid we didn't have any makeup.
I covered the same thing in terms of your car, that you should have a kind of kit in your car in case you're caught in your car. You could be caught in a snowstorm here. You could be caught someplace else and have to shelter in your car for an extended period of time as well.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much for part 1, and we'll be back soon with part 2.
Great.
Thanks for watching part 1 of our discussion today with Annie Searle. Be sure to join us next week for part 2. Then we'll finish our discussion on how to minimize your risks in today's risky world. Remember, whether you are buying, selling, or sitting on the sidelines, keep watching for important information on topics that are impacting your biggest asset, your home. To learn more about this and other shows, please visit us at northwestrealestateforum.com or check us out on Facebook. While you're there, be sure to order your copy of Annie Searle's book, Advice from a Risk Detective. It's our gift to you. You'll learn so much more than what you had time to discuss today. I'm your host, Patricia Wangsness. See you next time.